Good evening and welcome to Chicago Tonight. I'm Brandis Friedman.
And I'm Paris Schutz. On the show tonight,
we'll consider every option that we have.
Illinois Republicans ask a judge to toss out new legislative maps signed into law last week. Our Spotlight Politics team is here to talk about that and more.
I have a roof over my head. I have a plan for my future.
The journey from criminal defendant to stable tenant starts here in drug court. How Cook County agencies are teaming up.
And while reviewing more than 100 UFO sightings in the past 20 years, the Department of Defense seeks to explain the unexplainable in an upcoming report. But first, some of today's top stories. A bombshell from the Chicago Tribune this morning. The paper reports former Chicago alderperson and undercover federal mole Danny Solis secretly made audio and video recordings of former House Speaker Michael Madigan. The Tribune reports many of the discussions centered on Madigan seeking business for his private law firm. Solis was revealed in 2019 to have worn a wire on indicted 50-year alderperson Ed Burke. And we'll have more on this and other topics in just a bit in Spotlight Politics. Public health officials report more than 400 new cases of COVID-19, including 23 additional deaths. That makes for a statewide total of 1.386 million cases and 22,997 deaths. And the state reports more than 50,000 COVID vaccine doses were administered yesterday. Several activist groups expressed their displeasure with the Chicago Police Department's new foot pursuit policy. The groups say the policy was put together without any input from those who have been most impacted by foot chases. Those groups include Black Lives Matter Chicago and the Chicago Alliance Against Racist and Political Repression, among others. And they say the new policy permits foot pursuits for minor offenses and does not give clear guidance to officers.
The foot pursuit is a tactic where adrenaline is running high, and we know from the data that officers are disproportionately using lethal force, and remedies for that problem are just not in that policy.
CPD developed the new policy in the wake of the deaths of Anthony Alvarez and Adam Toledo, which came after foot chases. The department says it is still reviewing its policy. One of the busiest CTAL stations is set for a major upgrade. The CTA unveiled design plans for a modernized and fully accessible State and Lake station featuring a state-of-the-art roof and scenic views. The redo is part of the Red Line modernization program and is expected to cost $180 million. It would replace the current station that was originally built all the way back in 1895. A favorite summer tradition among Chicago's cycle enthusiasts is coming back. The city announces the return of Bike the Drive, and it'll take place over Labor Day weekend. Cyclists will have the entire drive to themselves from 57th Street to Bryn Mawr Avenue on Sunday, September 5th. This after the popular event was canceled last summer due to COVID. Registration is now open. And parts of Lakeshore Drive will be closed tonight into early tomorrow. That's because construction has begun on the replacement of the 43rd Street pedestrian bridge over the drive. Crews demolished the old bridge and are making way for a state-of-the-art new one. The closures will impact the drive from Oakwood and 39th Street to 47th Street. And now, Brandis, we toss it back to you.
Paris, thank you. Illinois Republicans ask a judge to toss out the state's new district maps. A city coalition begins redrawing ward boundaries, and the General Assembly plans to meet again to finish leftover items from last session. Our Spotlight Politics team is here to break it all down. Joining us are Heather Sharon and Paris Schutz. Amanda Vinicky has the evening off. So first up is state politics, guys. An update in the ComEd bribery scheme. The Tribune reports former 25th Ward alderperson Daniel Solis worked with the government to record then House Speaker Michael Madigan. Heather, what did the Tribune find?
Well, we found that even though Danny Solis is perhaps best known for capturing Ed Burke on tape, leading in part to his indictment on 14 counts of bribery, he apparently also captured former House Speaker Michael Madigan on tape during negotiations involving a variety of issues, but specifically a parking lot in Chinatown that Madigan was approached to help broker the sale of. It's owned by the state, and there was a private entity interested in buying it. So we now know, according to the Tribune, that there are not only tapes out there of the House Speaker, but also video of him in a meeting with Danny Solis which means that this investigation stretches back nearly 5 years, longer than we knew for certain before.
And Paris, what does this tell you about the federal government's investigation?
Well, first of all, I think it's pretty clear that the feds had Mike Madigan in their sights for many years, and we've heard this a lot, that Ed Burke was kind of like a side note, that they didn't expect to discover what they did about Ed Burke, and of course he has his indictment. But, you know, this could be very strong evidence if there were to be a case against the former speaker. You're talking about audio recordings, you're talking about video recordings. But still, if Madigan has done anything wrong, there is no allegation of that yet, and the feds have clearly made a really strong push to try and flip people like Madigan's former top aide to give up some dirt, and they're not doing it yet. And it could, they're even, you know, disclosing a lot in the public, more than they normally do about their investigations, in hopes that they do find something that they can maybe put out an indictment ostensibly on Madigan. So it says that even despite this, it still doesn't look like they've got him. Maybe they want corroborating evidence with the video and audio recordings to someone actually, you know, testifying that there was something untoward here.
And of course, we should point out that, you know, Madigan has repeatedly said, you know, throughout this entire time that he has done nothing wrong. Meanwhile, state Republicans are pushing back after Governor J.B. Pritzker signed the new legislative maps into law last week. Here is a clip of Senate Republican leader Dan McConaughey after Pritzker approved the maps.
He said a lot about the Voting Rights Act, but using inaccurate, flawed data clearly deviates from the practice of one person, one vote. He pretended to be a reformer, but he's just proved he's more of the same. A politician who will do anything to get elected, get power, and get your money.
Now, Heather, on what grounds are Republicans asking for it to be tossed, and what's the likelihood that it will be?
So the maps that the Democrats drew and that Governor Pritzker signed into law were not based on census data. And the lawsuit filed today alleges that these maps must be based on census data, not survey data collected by the U.S. Census Bureau. So that's the crux of the argument. They say it violates the 14th Amendment's Equal Protection Clause and that they should be tossed out, and that a judge should force a commission to be appointed to redraw the maps based on census figures, which we expect to get in mid-August.
So we also know that Illinois' General Assembly, Paris, they are planning on meeting again next week to go over some of the items that were left over from the last session. An energy bill, of course, is among them. Paris, what else is on the agenda?
Well, the energy bill is really interesting, and it's a similar bill to about 4 or 5 years ago, where it would mandate standards for completely carbon-free energy at some point, and then give hundreds of millions of dollars in subsidies to Exelon to keep struggling nuclear plants from closing, and that would result in a couple more dollars on everybody's ComEd bill. But the snag here, the reason they didn't pass this, is there are 2 coal plants, and the bill says the coal plants are going to have to close by 2035. Well, there's one downstate called Prairie State Energy saying we don't want to close, and here's the snag. There are many municipalities, including many in the Chicago area, Naperville and Batavia are some, that are invested in this plant. And so if it closed, it would harm taxpayers in those communities. And there's furious lobbying right now. I'm told that there are labor leaders and there are municipal mayors that are lobbying the governor to provide some kind of clause that would keep those plants open because of the issues here that these municipalities are invested in them.
So getting to city politics before we run out of time, guys, a commission of community members has begun redrawing the city's ward map. Heather, what are the odds that their proposal will be accepted?
Well, they need 10 votes from aldermen who would toss the matter to a referendum, basically put it in voters' hands, and that would be a monumental break from history, where aldermen have kept that power concentrated in themselves, and they've used it to reward their friends, consolidate their power, and of course, punish their enemies.
And Paris, you know, what can the last ward remap tell us about what's to come? Is there going to be a tense process ahead?
The thing I remember the most about that last remap 10 years ago was punishing your enemies. And it was a backroom deal. It was led by former Alderman Dick Mell. And there he went up to Alderman Nick Spazzato and said, well, I hope you know how to speak Spanish, because he had redrawn Spazzato's ward into a majority Hispanic Latino ward. Spazzato moved, won again. And then they drew the second ward completely different. They moved it from the south side to the north side. The reason? They wanted to get rid of former Alderman Bob Fioretti. And then there's the issue of the Black Caucus, the Latino Caucus, representation there. This is the ultimate sausage getting made type of thing.
All right, a lot more to watch there. The city extended the deadline for companies to make their pitch to operate and manage the city's electric distribution system, which ComEd currently oversees. Heather, what is the likelihood that the city is going to switch to a different provider?
Well, this is really a $9 billion question, because that's about how much it would cost for another company to come in and buy the transmission wires and all of the other things that go towards getting power to our homes. So it's unclear whether there's any other companies interested, but if there are, they've got 2 extra months to make their pitch to Mayor Lightfoot and the Chicago City Council.
Now, also, a key city panel supported plans to build a new Boys and Girls Club as part of a controversial redesigned police and fire training academy. And we know that there's been some back and forth depending on how you look at the city's violence figures. But construction of that academy began in January, Heather, kind of quietly without the usual fanfare. Why the quiet beginning?
Well, I haven't been able to get a question answered about that, but it's clear that this is a hot button issue. It remains a sore point for activists who have been working to reduce the budget of the Chicago Police Department. The last thing that they want to see is a $95 million new training facility built to sort of help the police expand their operations. And they're concerned that putting this Boys and Girls Club right next to the police will only sort of exacerbate those tensions, while Mayor Lightfoot says, no, it'll do exactly the opposite. It will give the police a chance to interact with people who live on the West Side and their kids and their families, and increase trust in the community and relieve some of that pressure.
Okay, that's it for an abbreviated Spotlight Politics tonight. My thanks to Heather Sharon and, of course, Paris Schutz. Up next, a new lease on life for some recovering drug addicts. Stay with us. Breaking the cycle of drug and alcohol addiction is a challenge made even tougher once the criminal justice system gets involved. And that can lead to even more struggles, like finding work and housing. Well, to solve for at least one of those, a new Cook County program teams agencies to help those recovering from addiction take cover in their own homes. After a year and a half, this apartment has become more than just a home for 33-year-old Carla Shaw.
It feels great. Like, I know I have somewhere to go to. I have a roof over my head. I have my baby.
4-month-old son Jalen is the first of Carla's 4 children to be able to come home from the hospital with his mother drug-free. Carla says she spent 15 years addicted to drugs, living a life in the streets.
I was trafficked at a young age, and I didn't know until I actually got in the program and they talked about it, and then I realized I was trafficked, and it was hard.
It was another criminal case that brought her here to Cook County Circuit Court Judge Charles Burns and his drug court, where defendants get addiction treatment and other resources.
One of the tenets of this program is that people are going to fail. I mean, I'm not looking to send people to the penitentiary for mistakes they make. As long as they are honest and they are committed to their recovery, we'll continue to work with them.
Carla is not only a graduate of the program, she was the speaker at a recent graduation.
Like many of you, my journey started when I was young. My home was filled with trauma.
But after treatment and graduation, she still encountered a familiar problem: finding affordable housing. Judge Burns says almost half of drug court defendants come into the program with no permanent housing.
But once they got through treatment, they were going back to the same neighborhoods where they grew up in. And unfortunately, those neighborhoods had a lot of danger and a lot of temptation for them.
I was in night housing because a wife of the landlord didn't want me there because of what I used to do. And then of my credit score or something.
So Burns partnered with Cook County Housing Authority Director Richard Minacchio.
It's hard enough to get affordable housing when, you know, you haven't been through the criminal justice system. You don't have other barriers to overcome. But it's doubly hard when you do have these barriers.
2 years ago, they started a program to provide housing choice vouchers to 25 graduates. Recipients pay 30% of their income towards housing, and the Housing Authority pays the rest. It's how Carla earned this one-bedroom apartment in Melrose Park. And it's also a shift from typical public housing rules that prevented people with criminal justice backgrounds from having access.
It's only been recently that publicly assisted housing has sort of seen the light. And, you know, the days of the one strike and you're out, those are the old days. And it's taken a while, I think, to get over that hurdle.
The National Association of Drug Court Professionals says there are about 4,000 drug courts across the country. But this partnership may be one of a kind.
We have the resources to do it. We have the opportunity to do that. We have partnerships, we have agencies, we have federal funding, we have state funding. We should do this. We should turn things around. There's too many times that we've just ignored these people and looked at them as outcasts and not treated them as people that are struggling with the disease.
Judge Burns says barely 4% of graduates commit another crime within a year of finishing, making people like Carla worth the investment. 10, 15 years ago when you were still in your addiction, did you see this future for yourself?
Never. Like, if you would have asked me what was I doing, I basically would have thought I was going to die. I thought I was going to die of my addiction because that's how bad I was out there.
But today, Carla's home is also an office where she mentors other survivors. With this new lease on life, she's planning to become a certified alcohol and drug counselor with dreams of owning her own home where she'll be able to have all of her children under one roof. And we should point out that when defendants complete drug court, the charges that brought them to that court are expunged, though some may have others in their backgrounds. Of the 25 vouchers offered to drug court graduates, 7 currently have housing, and other graduates have received vouchers and are in the process of searching for housing. The Housing Authority of Cook County says it's also hoping to expand the voucher program to other problem-solving courts like mental health or veterans courts. Up next, the U.S. government attempts to explain the unexplainable in an upcoming report.
Coverage of science and technology on Chicago Tonight is made possible in part by Joel M. Friedman, president of the Alvin H. Baum Family Fund.
Here's the question of all questions. Are we truly alone in the universe? A report on UFOs set to be released this month by the Department of Defense has many asking that same question. A recent New York Times story citing anonymous senior officials may give some clues as to what could be in this Pentagon report. And after reviewing more than 100 reported sightings of UAPs, which means unidentified aerial phenomena, government officials were reportedly less than definitive on the origins of aircraft, even bringing up new technologies by foreign governments as possible explanations. Joining us to discuss the UFO report and its implications are Mark Roediger, President and Scientific Director of the Center for UFO Studies. That's a local nonprofit research group that maintains electronic databases on UFO sightings and conducts research. And local astronomer and space exploration enthusiast, Mark Hammergren. Mark and Mark, welcome here to Chicago Tonight. So starting with Mark R., what do we know about this Pentagon report that has so many folks on the edge of their seat?
Well, what we think we know comes from a story in the New York Times because the report hasn't been released yet. And I think if the story is accurate, what we know is that the report is going to be what I consider to be really a first attempt at collecting and collating the data about what the government knows and what data it has on hand about UFOs. I don't think it's going to be definitive, and it's not going to say that UFOs are aliens, or that they're only Chinese or Russian technology, or what.
And Mark Hammergren, is it fair to say the conclusion here is going to be something like, there's no evidence to conclude that it's aliens, but we can't 100% rule it out yet?
Yeah, so the one thing that we can say from the reports so far about the upcoming report is that they do not exclude the possibility of it being an extraterrestrial intelligence or intelligences behind this. But also that they, however, can eliminate most U.S. technological aircraft, that kind of thing. So these seem to be unknown.
Mark Rodiger, you mentioned the possibility of some kind of aircraft from countries like Russia or China, some kind of test aircraft. Is that a likely explanation for at least some of these sightings?
Well, personally, the sightings that have gotten the most attention, the 3 videos that were released and then confirmed by the government to be authentic, it doesn't seem likely that those could be. Other sightings of the 120 certainly could be, because they have displayed, characteristics that are not mind-boggling, but concerning because they've been monitoring our aircraft, mostly the Navy. You'll note that where's the Air Force in all of this? And the answer is they've been absent in all this data.
And Mark Hammergren, Mark Rodiger brought up some of the sightings. I mean, there was a 2004 sighting by Navy pilots. There have been other sightings out there by some government agencies. The 2004 one was called the Tic Tac incident. What's peculiar about this?
Well, first of all, I think what we have to do is we have to look at the sightings, the sighting reports, and consider the ones that are anecdotal reports by viewers, okay, so by the pilots themselves. These are verbal reports, visual reports. And then we have the videos that in some cases help corroborate one of the sightings, may or maybe or not, but these are not necessarily connected together. So often, though, the reporting just kind of connects them together, so it seems like the stories are backed up by videos. And I've looked at the 3 videos that were released a few years ago. Hopefully there'll be many more. But the ones that were released, the objects that we see really do not display anything terribly unusual. They move in smooth motions, not jerking around. And from the detectors being used, they could easily be just glares from jet engines in the infrared cameras.
And Mark Rodiger, we mentioned that the New York Times, got this report leaked. It's going to be made public later this month, although there is going to be a part of it that's still classified. Are there any other big surprises or bombshells that you expect to discover?
I wish there was, and perhaps I won't call it a bombshell, but what I would hope is that the report would conclude that serious research should continue and, in fact, be increased on the subject. I'm not even sure what serious research is going on right now. So no announcement about something that would be concerning, but certainly a commitment to continuing and letting the scientific community in particular, not just the military, have access to data and have the funds to do the right types of research.
Mark Hammergren, the big, broad, philosophical, scientific question here: what are the odds of intelligent life, and intelligent life that has the capacity to somehow travel millions of light years here to visit us?
It's impossible to say, really, because we won't know until we start detecting life out there outside of Earth. And then there's the big unknown, too. Beyond that is, can they travel between the stars in any kind of, relatively rapid manner, something that doesn't take generations and generations? And we don't know any of that, so we can't really set a probability other than we don't have that hard physical evidence yet. So it can't be so commonplace that, we see them landing around us every day in our backyards.
And for some of those sci-fi fans that hope this report provides that evidence, it looks like they might be disappointed. Mark Rodiger, you mentioned that you want more serious research done here. You want collaboration. You lead a nonprofit that is doing this kind of research. So what kinds of things are you looking at, and what have you discovered?
Well, I'll tell you about a project that would really be fascinating, and that is that UFOs are reported sometimes at night, and they're quite bright. Satellites look down at the Earth continuously, at least many satellites, including commercial ones, and let alone military satellites. I'd like to see a project that used let's say, well-investigated sightings that we could locate precisely in time and space, and use satellite technology to try to look exactly at that time and space and see what we can learn. So I've got a million of them, but that's one project that I think would potentially pay great dividends.
Mark Hammergren, only a few seconds here, but what kind of research would you like to see?
Well, I would like to find something using modern technology that gives us really sharp, detailed images of whatever these are, so we can say that's clearly a jet, that's a bird in the background, so we can eliminate all of the just endless in some cases, nonsense that goes on around some of these sightings.
Speculation, conspiracy theories. I suspect that they will continue. Our thanks to Mark Rodiger and Mark Hammergren for joining us. Thanks so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And that is our show for this Wednesday night, abbreviated to bring you special pledge programming. Don't forget to stay connected with us by signing up for our daily briefing. And you can get Chicago Tonight streamed on Facebook, YouTube, and our website, WTTW.com/news.
And you can also get the show via podcast and the PBS video app. And please join us tomorrow night live at 7. Chicago and the state are set to fully reopen this Friday. We talk with the city's top doctor about the challenges that may still lie ahead.
And untold stories about Frida Kahlo in a new exhibit featuring more than 20 of her original pieces. And now for all of us here at Chicago Tonight, I'm Paris Schutz.
And I'm Brandis Friedman. Thanks for watching. Stay healthy and safe, and have a good night.